The encounter. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roofs of Sector 7's Undercity, creating a symphony of industrial percussion that Victor had long since learned to ignore. He pulled his weathered jacket tighter as he navigated the maze of alleyways. His scanner held before him like a divining rod, searching for salvageable tech among the mountains of discarded hardware. The scanner's soft chirp led him deeper into the labyrinth, past graffiti-covered walls that flickered, with holographic advertisements for things no one down here could afford. That's when he saw her, a huddled form beneath a malfunctioning neon sign that stuttered between languages he couldn't read. She was unlike any species he'd encountered in the melting pot of the Undercity. Skin like polished moonstone, hair that seemed to shimmer between silver and violet depending on the angle of the dying light. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, multifaceted like cut gems, currently fixed on him with a mixture of wariness and desperate calculation. "Stay back," she rasped in accented universal, her voice barely above a whisper. One trembling hand clutched what Victor recognized as a high-grade neural interface, military spec, worth more than his shop made in 6 months. "Easy," Victor said, setting down his scanner and raising his hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." The alien girl, she couldn't be more than the human equivalent of 20, struggled to sit straighter. "Trade," she managed, holding out the interface. "Food. Just food." Victor's heart clenched. He'd seen desperation before, but there was something different about her. Despite her obvious starvation, she held herself with the ghost of dignity, her chin raised even as her body shook with weakness. "Keep it," he said, reaching slowly into his pack. He pulled out his lunch, nothing fancy, just a thermal container, of stew and some protein bars. "No trade necessary." Confusion flickered across her features. "I do not understand. Everything has price in human sectors." "Not everything," Victor said, setting the food within her reach and stepping back. "What's your name?" She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decipher some hidden agenda. Finally, she reached for the container with shaking hands. "Zephyrah," she whispered. Of nowhere now." Victor watched as she tried to maintain composure while eating, taking small, careful bites despite her obvious hunger. He noticed the way she held the spoon, with 3 fingers in a grip that suggested different anatomy, different customs. The threadbare cloak she wore bore the remnants of intricate embroidery, barely visible beneath the grime. "I'm Victor," he offered, settling against the opposite wall to give her space. "I run a repair shop few blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm." Zephyrah paused mid-bite, those jeweled eyes studying him with an intensity that made him want to fidget. "Why?" she asked simply. Victor shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. "Because the rain's getting worse, and that sign's going to short out completely soon. Because nobody should have to trade their last valuable for a meal." "I do not accept charity," she said, but her voice wavered. "Then don't," Victor replied. "Accept an opportunity instead. I could use an extra pair of hands in the shop. The pay's not much, but it includes meals and a place to sleep." For the first time, something like hope flickered in those strange, beautiful eyes. Building trust. The first week was a disaster. Zephyrah approached every task in Victor's cluttered repair shop with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. She held tools like ceremonial objects, studied circuit boards as if they contained sacred texts, and once spent 3 hours organizing screws by subtle variations in their threading that only she could perceive. "You don't have to catalog every single capacitor," Victor said gently, finding her cross-legged on the floor surrounded by hundreds of tiny components arranged in elaborate spirals. "I usually just grab what looks right." Her multifaceted eyes, widened in what he'd learned, was horror. "But the variance in impedance values! How do you achieve optimal efficiency without proper classification?" Victor bit back a smile. We call it good enough engineering down here. Good enough, she repeated slowly as if tasting the words. This phrase makes no sense. A thing is either sufficient for its purpose or it is not. Despite the chaos, Victor found himself looking forward to her questions. Zephyra absorbed information like a sponge, but filtered it through a world view. So different from his own that even simple tasks became adventures in cross-cultural communication. Why does the human customer say his device is sick? She asked one afternoon, holding a battered datapad. Electronics do not possess biological functions. It's a metaphor, Victor explained, taking the device. We describe broken things, like they're alive sometimes. Makes them feel more fixable, I guess. She tilted her head, a gesture he'd noticed she made when processing something particularly puzzling. So humans assign life to non-living objects to increase hope? Something like that. Fascinating. My people. She stopped abruptly, her expression closing off like a shutter. Victor had learned not to push when she did this. Whatever past she carried, she'd share it when ready. Instead, he handed her a wrench. Want to help me with the hoverbike in Bay 2? Customer says it's throwing a tantrum. The ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. Another sick machine? The worst kind, a temperamental teenager. By the third week, they'd developed a rhythm. Zephyra's perfectionism balanced Victor's improvisation. She caught errors he would have missed, while he taught her the art of creative solutions when the proper parts weren't available. Their shared meals became the highlight of Victor's days. Zephyra approached human food with scientific curiosity, dissecting flavors and textures with running commentary that never failed to amuse him. This pizza is structurally unsound, she announced, holding up a drooping slice. Why design food that compromises its own integrity? Because it tastes good, Victor suggested. She took a careful bite, chewed thoughtfully, then nodded with grave seriousness. Acceptable reasoning. He learned her preferences quickly. She loved anything with complex spices but couldn't tolerate excessive sweetness. Textures mattered more than flavors. She'd eat nearly anything crunchy but regarded soft foods with suspicion. When he brought her roasted nuts from a vendor she'd mentioned smelling, her entire face lit up with joy so pure it made his chest tight. Where I come from, she said carefully. We had something similar. Tree seeds roasted in star salt. I haven't tasted anything like it in... She trailed off, but not before he caught the shimmer of moisture in her eyes. Hey, Victor said softly. We've got plenty of nuts here, different stars, same snacks. She laughed. Really laughed. For the first time since he'd met her. The sound was like nothing he'd heard before, melodic and multi-tonal, as if she laughed in chords instead of single notes. Different stars, same snacks, she repeated. I enjoy your strange wisdom, Victor. One evening, as they worked side by side on a particularly stubborn gravitational stabilizer, Zephyra suddenly spoke without prompting. You have not asked. Victor looked up from his soldering. Asked what? About before. About why I was... She gestured vaguely, encompassing the alley, the hunger, the desperation he'd found her in. Figured you'd tell me when you wanted to, Victor said simply. Or not. Either way's fine. She stared at him for a long moment, then returned to her work. But he noticed her shoulders had relaxed and she hummed softly, an ethereal sound like whined through crystal chimes. Later that night, as they closed up shop, she paused at the door to her small room above the workspace. Victor? Yeah? Thank you. For the good enough. He grinned. Anytime, Zeph. She blinked at the shortened name, then offered that rare, genuine smile. Zeph. I think I like this. As her door closed, Victor realized he was in trouble. Somewhere between the scattered capacitors and shared meals, between her literal interpretations and musical laughter, He'd started falling for the mysterious alien girl who'd turned his orderly life into beautiful chaos, and for once, good enough didn't feel sufficient anymore. Hidden dangers. The bounty hunters arrived on a Tuesday. Victor noticed them first, two figures in sleek armor standing out like chrome thumbs among the rust and grime of Sector 7. They moved with predatory precision through the market, showing hollow images to vendors who shook their heads and hurried away. He slipped back into the shop where Zephyra was elbow-deep in a malfunctioning atmospheric processor. "Zeph, we might have a problem." She looked up, a smudge of coolant on her cheek that made his heart skip despite the circumstances. "The processor's flux matrix is more damaged than—" "No, not that." He moved to the window, peering through the grimy glass. "Hunters. Professional ones by the look of it." The effect was immediate. Zephyra went rigid, her skin shifting from its usual moonstone shade to something closer to winter ice. The tool in her hand clattered to the floor. "Description?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tall, maybe 7 feet. Armor's got that blue-black sheen. One's got 4 arms, the other's wearing a neural crown. Valdari." She breathed. "Elite trackers." Her multifaceted eyes darted around the shop as if seeing it for the first time. "Victor, you need to leave. Now!" Like hell. He was already moving, pulling down the security shutters. "Storage room. There's a hidden compartment behind the spare parts shelf. You don't understand. If they find me here, then they'll have to go through me first." He grabbed her hand, startled by how cold it had become. "Come on." They'd barely made it to the storage room when the front door chimed. Victor's blood ran cold. He'd forgotten to lock it in his haste. "Stay here," he whispered, sliding the false panel closed behind her. He grabbed a wrench and adopted his best confused mechanic expression before heading out front. The Valdari hunters filled the small shop like storms contained in armor. The 4-armed one spoke first, its voice a synthesized rasp. "Human, we seek information." "Yeah? Well, I seek paying customers." Victor gestured at the cluttered workspace. "You need something fixed? Or are you just here to intimidate the local color?" The one with the neural crown projected a hollow image that made Victor's heart sink. It was Zephyra, but different, her hair elaborately braided with what looked like starlight, wearing robes that seemed to be cut from nebulas themselves, regal, unmistakable. Princess Zephyra Sol Kireth, last heir of the Stellar Concordat, the hunter said. Significant bounty for information leading to her recovery. Victor forced himself to study the image with apparent interest. "Princess, huh? Don't get many of those in Sector 7. Try the tourist district. Sometimes rich kids go slumming there." The 4-armed hunter moved faster than Victor could track. One hand seized his throat, lifting him off the ground while another produced a neural probe. "Shall we verify your truthfulness directly?" "Go ahead," Victor choked out. "But when you fry my brain and still don't find anything, you'll owe me a new nervous system. Those aren't cheap." A tense moment passed. Then the hunter dropped him. "Mark this location," it told its partner. "We will return if our other leads prove false." They left like shadows dissolving, but Victor waited a full 10 minutes before, letting Zephyra out. She emerged pale and shaking, those jeweled eyes bright with unshed tears. "Princess," he asked softly. She collapsed into a chair, suddenly looking younger than ever. Before the hegemony came, before they... She wrapped her arms around herself. "They destroyed our worlds, Victor. 17 systems, billions of lives, because we wouldn't surrender our technology. I'm all that's left of the royal line. Maybe all that's left, period." Victor knelt beside her chair. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because then I'd have to remember." Her voice broke. "Because here, fixing broken things with you, I could pretend I was just Zeph. Not the princess who ran while her people burned. Not the coward who chose survival over honor. Hey, he took her hands gently. Surviving isn't cowardice. It's the hardest kind of bravery there is. She met his eyes then, and he saw galaxies of pain in those multifaceted depths. They'll be back. The bounty, the hegemony wants to ensure no legitimate heir can rally the survivor colonies. I've put you in danger just by existing. Good thing I like dangerous women, Victor said, winning a watery laugh. Look, I know people, smugglers, hackers, folks who specialize in making problems disappear. We can— No. She stood abruptly. I won't drag you deeper into this. You've done enough. More than enough. Zephyra, don't! She moved toward the door. Please don't make this harder. Victor played his last card. So you're just going to run? Leave the atmospheric processor half-fixed? Mrs. Chen's going to be furious. She paused at the door. And what about the gravity stabilizer we've been working on? You finally figured out that resonance issue. You really want to leave before seeing if it works? That's not fair, she whispered. Neither is you leaving. He stepped closer. I know what I'm risking, Zeph. I'm choosing to risk it. Because somewhere between you organizing my capacitors and laughing at pizza, you became worth it. So please, let me help. She turned slowly, and for the first time since the hunters appeared, he saw hope flicker in her eyes. You impossible human. That's the nicest thing you've ever called me. Despite everything, she smiled. We'll need to move. Tonight. I know a place. Sector 12, deeper in the underground. Less pretty, but harder to find. And the shop? Victor shrugged. Tools can be replaced. Partners like you? Not so much. She crossed the space between them in 2 swift steps and pressed her forehead to his, a gesture that felt ceremonial, intimate. In my culture, this means, I trust you with my life. In mine, it means we should probably start packing. Her laugh was shaky, but real. As they hurriedly gathered their essential belongings, Victor caught her hand. We'll figure this out, he promised. Together. Together, she echoed, and for the first time, Victor thought she might actually believe it. Revelations. Their new home in Sector 12 was a far cry from Victor's old shop, a converted maintenance tunnel that hadn't seen official use in decades. But it was secure, hidden behind 3 layers of black market security, and most importantly, off the hunter's radar. It has character, Zephyra said diplomatically, running a finger along a wall that leaked condensation. That's one word for it, Victor agreed, setting down a crate of salvaged tools. But the previous tenant installed a military-grade scrambler field. We're invisible to most scanning tech. They'd been there 2 weeks when Zephyra finally began sharing the full truth. It started small, mentions of palace gardens that grew in zero gravity, of libraries that stored knowledge in crystallized starlight. But late one night, as they worked together to repair a client's navigation system, the dam finally broke. My coronation was to be on my 20th cycle, she said quietly, her hands never pausing in their delicate work. The Concordat had thrived for millennia. We were explorers, Victor, scientists. We mapped distant galaxies and decoded the songs of dying stars. Victor remained silent, afraid that any interruption might stop the flow of words. The hegemony came to us as friends at first. They wanted our jump gate technology, the ability to fold space without the massive energy expenditure their ships required. When we refused to weaponize it, she set down her tools, staring at something beyond the cramped workshop. They gave us 3 days to reconsider. My parents spent those days evacuating who they could. They put me on the last ship, told me to preserve our knowledge, to survive. Zeph, I watched from the evacuation ship's viewport, she continued, her voice hollow. Watched our sun go nova, artificially induced. The corona reached out like burning fingers and just consumed everything. 17 worlds, Victor. Gone in minutes. Victor moved around the workbench, pulling her against him. She was rigid at first, then melted into his embrace, her body shaking with silent sobs. The worst part? Her voice was muffled against his chest. I was relieved. For one horrible moment, I was grateful to be alive when billions died. What kind of leader feels that? A human one, Victor said softly. Or whatever your species' equivalent is. You were 20 years old, Zeph. Nobody should have to choose between survival and guilt. She pulled back to look at him, those faceted eyes reflecting the workshop's dim lights like scattered stars. How do you always know what to say? I don't, he admitted. I just know what I see. And I see someone who spent 2 years punishing herself for being alive. Someone who works 18-hour days fixing broken things because she couldn't fix the big broken thing. Is that your human psychology? That's my Zeph psychology, subspecialty of Victor's studies. Despite everything, she laughed, that musical, multi-tonal sound he'd grown to love. When did you become so wise? Sometime between finding you in that alley and now. He cupped her face gently. You're not just a survivor, Zephyra Sol Kirith. You're a keeper of knowledge, a bridge between what was and what could be. That's not cowardice. That's purpose. She leaned into his touch, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with possibility. Victor, I know, he said softly. Different species, different worlds. Probably 100 reasons why this is complicated. 101, she corrected, but she was smiling. My people bond for life, genetically, empathically, completely. It's not something we do lightly. Good thing I'm not the casual type, either. She studied him with those impossible eyes, and Victor felt like she was seeing through to his very atoms. You would bind yourself to a fugitive princess with no kingdom? A mechanic who organizes screws obsessively and still doesn't understand pizza? I'd bind myself to Zeph, he said simply. The woman who insists on categorizing capacitors, who laughs like music, who makes instant noodles into a gourmet experience through sheer force of curiosity. The rest is just backstory. You beautiful, impossible human, she whispered, and then she was kissing him. It was nothing like Victor had imagined. Her lips were cooler than human normal, and there was a strange resonance, like touching a tuning fork that vibrated at exactly the right frequency. His mind exploded with colors that didn't exist, sensations that had no names. For a moment, he saw through her eyes, saw himself not as the scruffy mechanic he knew, but as a constellation of kindness, strength, and unwavering loyalty. When they broke apart, both were breathless. Was that a partial bond? She finished, looking as stunned as he felt. That shouldn't be possible. Different species can't usually. But then, you've never been usual, have you? Before Victor could respond, their security system chimed. Someone had found them. But when the door opened, it wasn't hunters who entered. 3 figures in elaborate robes stood in their threshold, their bearing regal despite their worn appearance. The lead figure, elderly, with skin like polished obsidian, fell to one knee. Your Highness, the figure intoned. We have searched so long. The Concordate's remnants have gathered. Your people need their queen. Zephyra's hand found Victor's, gripping tight enough to hurt. How many survived? 40,000 scattered across 12 refugee camps. More find us every day. But without legitimate leadership, without the royal codes you carry, the elder looked up, hope burning in ancient eyes. Come home, Majesty. Lead us to a new beginning. Victor felt her trembling and squeezed back. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The princess and the mechanic, bound by something stronger than protocol or propriety. Zephyra straightened, and Victor saw the queen she could become. I need time to consider, to decide between love and duty, the elder said, not unkindly. We understand. But choose quickly, Majesty. Your people have waited long enough. As the delegation left, Zephyra turned to Victor, conflict written in every line of her body. I don't know if I can do this. Whatever you decide, Victor said. You won't do it alone. She pressed against him, and he held her as the weight of 40,000 souls settled on her shoulders like a crown made of stars and sorrow. Part 5. The Choice. The refugee ship. Stellar Remembrance hung in Earth's orbit like a wounded bird, its hull patched with salvaged plates from a dozen different vessels. Victor stood beside Zephyra on the observation deck, watching her people move. Through the corridors below, farmers, scientists, children who'd never known their homeworld, all looking to her with desperate hope. 43,217, Zephyra said quietly. That's how many remain, out of billions. They'd been aboard for 3 days while Zephyra met with the Survivor Council, learned the full scope of what rebuilding would require. Victor had stayed by her side, a silent support as she absorbed report after report of resource shortages, failing life support systems, and dwindling hope. The Council has found a habitable moon in the Kepler sector, she continued. Unclaimed, barely livable. But it could work. With the royal codes, I can activate our remaining seed vaults, access the encrypted knowledge banks, give them a chance at a future. That's good, Victor said, though his heart was breaking. That's what they need. She turned to him then, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks like liquid starlight. I can't ask you to come. The journey alone would take years. And the moon, it's not Earth. Different atmosphere, different gravity. You'd need constant biosupplements just to survive. You're not asking. I'm offering. Victor. But, he continued gently, we both know that's not the real issue here. She closed her eyes. They need their queen. Not a queen who spends half her time wondering what her human mate is sacrificing, worrying if he's slowly dying from environmental incompatibility. They need someone who can give everything. And you need? Irrelevant, she whispered. Like hell it is. Victor took her. Hands. Zeph, you've spent 2 years believing you don't deserve to want things because others died. But martyring yourself won't bring them back. The observation deck doors opened, and Elder Corvain entered, followed by several council members. Your Highness, we await your decision. Zephyra straightened, and Victor watched her transform into Queen Zephyra Sol Kireth, last of her line. But then she did something unexpected. She took Victor's hand and raised it, intertwining their fingers, for all to see. Honored Council, she began, her voice carrying the weight of stars. I have heard your reports, seen our people's need. I know what you expect, a queen who will dedicate every breath to rebuilding what was lost. Murmurs rippled through the council, eyes fixing on their joined hands. But I must tell you a truth. The princess you seek died with our worlds. I am someone new, someone forged in loss, yes, but also in discovery, in learning that strength comes not from isolation, but from connection. She squeezed Victor's hand. This human saved me, not just from starvation, but from becoming a ghost wearing a crown. He taught me that good enough can be perfect, that broken things can be beautiful, that choosing happiness isn't betrayal of the dead. Elder Corvain's expression was unreadable. Your Highness suggests? I suggest that our people need hope more than they need a symbol. They need practical leadership, not a martyr on a throne. Zephyra's voice grew stronger. I will give you the royal codes. I will help establish the colony, train others in the knowledge I carry. But I will not be your queen. Shocked silence filled the deck. I choose to stay on Earth, she continued, To build a life with someone who sees me as Zeph, not your highness. To perhaps establish an embassy here, a bridge between our scattered people and humanity. To live, truly live, as my parents wanted me to. This is unprecedented. Another council member sputtered. The bloodline will continue or it won't, Zephyra said firmly. But it will not be preserved through duty alone. Our people survived because they adapted. Perhaps it's time our traditions did the same. Elder Corvain stepped forward slowly. Victor tensed, but the old being's expression had softened. Your mother said something similar once. That leadership meant knowing when to hold tight and when to let go. He bowed deeply. The codes, your high, Lady Zephyra, that will suffice. Your cousin Theron has shown aptitude for governance. With your knowledge and his leadership, a better combination than a reluctant queen, Zephyra agreed. What followed was a whirlwind of knowledge transfer, ceremonial passing of authorities, and preparations for the colony ship's departure. Victor watched Zephyra work tirelessly to ensure her people had everything they needed and loved her more for it. She wasn't abandoning them. She was setting them free, just as they were freeing her. On the final day, as the stellar remembrance prepared to depart, Zephyra stood once more on the observation deck. Her people filed past, some disappointed, others understanding, many offering blessings in their musical language. A young girl, perhaps 7 years old, tugged on Zephyra's robe. Your Highness, will you forget us? Zephyra knelt to the child's level. Never. You are written in my stars, little one. But sometimes love means letting go. Be brave for me, yes? Grow strong and wise. Make our new world something beautiful. The girl nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by hugging Victor's leg. Take care of her, metal fixer man. Always, Victor promised. As the ship departed, Zephyra leaned into Victor's embrace. No regrets? He asked. None. My people have their future, and I have mine. She turned in his arms, those multifaceted eyes bright with possibility. So, husband-to-be, shall we go home? I believe Mrs. Chen is still waiting for her atmospheric processor. Home, Victor agreed, kissing her forehead, though we might need a bigger shop. I have a feeling we're going to be busy. Oh, Earth's full of broken things that need fixing, and now I've got the best partner in the galaxy. Her laugh rang out like bells across stars. Only the galaxy? I'm insulted. Fine. The universe. Better. They made their way back to Earth, to Sector 12, to their cramped workshop that leaked and hummed. But it was theirs. This life they'd chosen against all odds and expectations. 6 months later, when they stood before a human justice of the peace and a concordant witness, exchanging vows in English and stellar harmonics, Zephyra wore a simple mechanic's jumpsuit and a smile brighter than any crown. You fed me when I had nothing, she said, reprising ancient words in a modern context. So now, I give you everything. And you fixed me when I didn't know I was broken, Victor replied. So now we fix things together. Together, she agreed, and kissed him as stars sang their approval overhead. In the end, love was its own kingdom, and they ruled it well.